If you open the Bible and count every miracle Jesus performed, you'll find a strange statistic. Almost 1/4 of them are actually exorcisms. To be precise, 23% of his supernatural activity was direct warfare against demons. Why was this theme so dominant in antiquity, and what does it say about the sacred text? The answer might surprise you. Think for a moment about what that really means. Jesus didn't spend most of his time preaching on mountaintops or turning water into wine. No. Almost 1/4 of his publicly demonstrated power was used to cast demonic entities out of people. This is not a footnote in the Gospels. It is a repeated, systematic pattern that is impossible to ignore. The Bible is not just philosophy. It is not just a moral code or a collection of parables. If you read it carefully, it is a frontline journal. And today, we are reading that journal. Open the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. It is one of the oldest and most direct accounts of Jesus. It does not begin with a long sermon. It does not begin with the healing of a blind man or a paralytic. It begins with an exorcism. Jesus enters the synagogue in Capernaum, a sacred place, a house of prayer, and there, in the middle of the gathering, a man begins to cry out. Not the man himself. Something inside him cries out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." The war began on the very first public day, not on a battlefield, in a synagogue, in front of everyone. And Jesus does not negotiate. He does not explain. He does not give a speech. He simply says, "Be quiet and come out of him." And the spirit leaves. The people around him are not struck by his gentleness. They are struck by his authority. What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. This is the first public impression Jesus makes in the Gospel of Mark. Not a healing, authority over demons. But the most dramatic case, the most cinematic scene in all 4 Gospels, is the demoniac of Gadara, also called Gerasene in some versions. Jesus steps off a boat and is met by a man who lived among the tombs. No one could bind him anymore. He broke chains. He cut himself with stones. Day and night he screamed through the mountains and the burial grounds. When Jesus asks his name, the answer comes cold. "My name is Legion, for we are many." A Roman legion numbered between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers. This is not a single demon. This is a mass occupation of one human being. The demons beg to be sent into a herd of pigs on the hillside. Jesus gives them permission. 2,000 pigs rush down the steep bank into the sea and drown, and the man sits quietly, clothed, in his right mind. The townspeople, rather than rejoicing, beg Jesus to leave their region. They were not afraid of the demons. They were afraid of him. The third major case is the epileptic boy in Mark chapter 9. His father brings him to the disciples, but they can do nothing. When Jesus comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration and hears what happened, he says something unusual. "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you?" And when he casts out the spirit, he adds, in response to the disciples asking why they had failed, something that has been engraved in Christian tradition ever since. This kind can only come out by prayer and fasting. In other words, there are hierarchies. There are demons that require more than a simple command. Before sending his disciples into the world, Jesus gives them a clear mandate, not just to preach, not just to heal the sick. explicitly in Mark chapter 16. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. Casting out demons is listed before speaking in tongues and before healing. It is the first power delegated to them. The apostles take this seriously. The book of Acts is filled with confrontations with demonic entities. Paul exorcises a slave girl in Philippi who had a spirit of divination and whose fortune-telling was generating profit for her owners. When the spirit leaves, the prophet disappears. Her owners throw Paul in prison. Demonic power was, quite literally, a business model. In the first centuries of Christianity, the Church institutes something unique in religious history: the Order of Exorcists. This was not an exotic ritual. It was an official function, recognized within the church hierarchy alongside deacon and priest. Candidates for baptism underwent ritual exorcism sessions called scrutinies before being received into the community. The idea was straightforward. A person coming from the world comes from territory controlled by hostile entities. They must be liberated before they can enter. And Christianity spread precisely through this liberation. In pagan cities where temples were dedicated to gods that Paul explicitly calls demons in 1 Corinthians, the church did not arrive with philosophical arguments. It arrived with demonstrable power. People witnessed it. People were set free. The 19th century changes everything. Psychiatry is born as a serious discipline. Sigmund Freud builds an architecture of the unconscious mind. Emil Kraepelin classifies mental illness. And suddenly, things that people had described for 2 millennia as possession receive new names: clinical and cold. Epilepsy, with its convulsions, foaming at the mouth, and loss of bodily control, had been considered for centuries a manifestation of demonic presence. Now it has a neurological explanation: abnormal electrical discharges in the brain. Schizophrenia, with its voices, perceived external entities, and the conviction that one is controlled by an outside force, receives a psychiatric diagnosis and a pharmacological treatment. Dissociative identity disorder, known popularly as multiple personality, in which an individual appears to be inhabited by several distinct beings with different names, voices, and behaviors, becomes an object of clinical study. Modern thinking drew a simple line: what was once a demon is now a symptom. Superstition gave way to science, and for millions of people, this was a genuine liberation. They no longer had to carry the stigma of being possessed. They could receive real medical help. But this simple line has one fragile point, a single point that science has not resolved in over 150 years of research. There is a category of documented cases, not in medieval manuscripts, but in medical records and video footage from the 20th and 21st centuries, that fit no diagnosis. The first element is dead languages. In documented exorcism cases, the entity speaking through the patient fluently uses classical Latin, Aramaic, or ancient Hebrew, languages the victim has never studied, never heard, and cannot reproduce in their normal state. Neurologists and psychiatrists have no explanation for xenoglossia, the ability to speak a language to which a person has never been exposed. There is no known biological mechanism by which the brain can generate fluency in an unstudied language. The second element is the revealing of secrets. This is, arguably, the most disturbing phenomenon from a rational standpoint. During exorcisms, the entity, not the patient, discloses information to the priests or people present that the victim could not possibly have known. Hidden sins, private thoughts, events from the past at which the victim was not present, and sometimes things that have not yet happened. These accounts appear in Vatican records, in the testimonies of canonical exorcists, and in cases documented independently by secular researchers. The case of Anneliese Michel in Germany in the 1970s went to trial. The case of Roland in 1949, which inspired the film The Exorcist, involved Jesuit priests who kept detailed journals of phenomena they could not explain. Objects moved without physical contact, radically altered voices, and knowledge of liturgical Latin with no prior training. American psychiatrist M. Scott Peck, author of the bestseller The Road Less Traveled, personally attended 2 exorcisms and wrote about them with clinical precision. His conclusion, after decades of psychiatric practice, was that there exists a residual category of cases for which the medical model does not provide sufficient explanation. Science buried demons under diagnoses, and in the vast majority of cases, it did the right thing. But in that narrow margin of extreme cases, the diagnosis does not hold. And there, the text that is 2,000 years old remains the only map available. Coming back to the statistic we started with, 23%. Almost a quarter of Jesus' demonstrated power was used for a single purpose, freeing people from a control that was not their own. This is not an accidental number. It is a theological priority. The modern world has chosen to move this subject into the territory of folklore, horror films, and overly simple believers. But the texts remain. The medically inexplicable records remain, and the question remains open. If Jesus, in 23% of his public activity, explicitly treated a category of human suffering that he called demonic possession, what did he know about human nature that we have chosen to forget? Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that everything the Bible describes as possession is, in fact, mental illness, and that science has solved the mystery? Or are there cases you have personally seen, heard, or experienced that no diagnosis can explain? Maybe you know someone who went through a real deliverance. Maybe you heard a story from your family, your community, something you could never rationally explain. Write it in the comments. Every story matters. Hit like if this video made you look at the Bible differently, and subscribe, because the next episodes go even deeper into the territories that official history prefers to leave in the dark.